The pristine white sheets of the hospital bed were a cruel joke, a stark contrast to the messy, agonizing reality of her life tearing apart. One moment Isabella was pushing through the searing pain of premature labor, her heart screaming for her husband, Alejandro. The next he was there. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, radiating a cold, polished glamour, was the one woman Isabella had prayed was just a figment of her paranoid, pregnant imagination. And as her world crumbled, a single devastating question hung in the air, a question that would be answered by a DNA test, a test that would either validate her deepest love or confirm her darkest betrayal, changing everything forever. Isabella's life was by all external measures a modern-day fairy tale. She lived in a sprawling glass-walled mansion nestled in the most exclusive enclave of the city, a home that boasted panoramic views and an infinity pool that bled into the horizon. Her wardrobe was a curated collection of runway couture, her social calendar a whirlwind of philanthropic galas and exclusive art openings. And at the center of it all was Alejandro Morales, her husband. Alejandro was a titan of industry, a self-made millionaire who had built a tech empire from the ground up. He was devastatingly handsome, with eyes the color of dark honey, and a smile that could disarm world leaders and melt Isabella's heart in equal measure. They had met 5 years ago at a charity auction, a chance encounter that felt like kismet. He had pursued her with a single-minded intensity that left her breathless, showering her with affection, respect, and a love so profound it felt like the safest harbor in the world. Their marriage had been passionate, a true partnership. He valued her opinion on everything from business acquisitions to the thread count of their linens. She, in turn, was his confidant, his sanctuary from the cutthroat world he navigated. When she told him she was pregnant 9 months ago, he had wept with joy, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around in their sun-drenched living room, promising their child a life of boundless love and opportunity. For the first 6 months of her pregnancy, that promise held true. Alejandro was attentive doting. He'd rush home from the office for her doctor's appointments, massage her swollen feet for hours, and talk to her growing belly, telling his unborn child stories of the adventures they would have. Isabella had never felt more cherished, more certain of her happiness. But then a subtle shift occurred, a change in the atmosphere as imperceptible as a barometric drop before a storm. It started with the late nights. Closing a big deal, mi amor, he'd murmur, his voice weary over the phone. Then came the weekend trips, sudden and non-negotiable. Investor meetings in Singapore, he'd explain, his kiss a fleeting brush against her cheek as he left. The distance wasn't just physical. The easy intimacy they shared began to fray at the edges. He grew guarded with his phone, angling it away from her, when a text message lit up the screen. The shared laughter that once filled their cavernous home became a rare echo. Isabella, hormonal and increasingly anxious, tried to dismiss her fears. This was the pressure of his work, she told herself. He was building a legacy for their child. To doubt him felt like a betrayal in itself. Yet the gnawing unease persisted. She started noticing a new scent on his suits, a faint floral perfume that was decidedly not hers. She saw a credit card statement with a charge for a lavish dinner at a restaurant they had never been to together. When she gently questioned him, he became defensive, his voice taking on a hard edge she'd never heard before. "Are you questioning my loyalty?" Isabella. After everything he'd asked, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt that made her instantly retreat, apologizing for her insecurity. The name Sofia Reyes first entered her consciousness as a whisper on the society pages. A rising starlet, an actress with smouldering eyes and a reputation for being as ambitious as she was beautiful. Alejandro's company had recently signed a major endorsement deal with her. "She's the new face of our brand," he'd explained dismissively when Isabella saw a picture of them together at a press event, his arm firmly around Sophia's waist. They looked for all the world like a couple. Isabella spent the final weeks of her pregnancy in a state of quiet torment, her days a hollow performance of the happy, expectant mother. She decorated the nursery in shades of cream and soft blue. Her hands assembling a crib, she prayed her husband would one day stand beside, with love not duty. She smiled at the baby showers her friends threw, accepting gifts with a gratitude that felt like a lie. Every night she lay in their king-sized bed, the space beside her feeling more like a chasm, and prayed that the birth of their child would be the miracle that would bring her Alejandro back to her. She didn't know that the birth would indeed bring a revelation, but it would be far from the miracle she was hoping for. It would be the beginning of the end. The first pang of pain was sharp and sudden, a fierce clenching deep in her abdomen that stole her breath. Isabella gasped, her hand flying to her belly. It was 2 weeks before her due date. It was too soon. She tried to breathe through it, telling herself it was just another Braxton Hicks contraction, another false alarm. But then another came stronger this time, a relentless wave that brought her to her knees on the cold marble floor of the foyer. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the pain. This was real. This was happening. Her first instinct was to call Alejandro. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone. His name at the top of her recent calls. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. "The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message. Alejandro." "It's me," she choked out, her voice a ragged whisper between contractions. "The baby. It's coming. I'm going to the hospital. Please, please meet me there. I need you." She tried again. Voicemail. And again. Voicemail. The automated voice was a cold, indifferent sentinel guarding the man who had promised to move mountains for her. Despair warred with the urgency of the moment. With a surge of adrenaline, she called her driver, her voice miraculously steady as she gave him the address. The Clínica Universidad de Navarra in Madrid. The private hospital Alejandro had insisted upon, renowned for its state-of-the-art maternity ward and its discretion for high-profile clients. The drive through the city was a blur of traffic lights and horns, each sound amplifying the frantic rhythm of her heart. The contractions were coming faster now, a merciless tide pulling her under. The hospital staff was waiting, alerted by her call. They whisked her into a private birthing suite, a room that looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility with soft lighting and sweeping city views. But its opulence only made her feel more alone. Nurses with kind, professional faces hooked her up to monitors their soothing words, a distant buzz against the roar of her fear. Where was he? Hours bled into one another. Each contraction was a mountain she had to climb alone. She clutched the cool metal of the bed rail, her knuckles white, her body screaming for relief, her heart screaming for her husband. The nurses offered sympathetic glances. "Have we managed to reach your husband, Mrs. Morales?" one asked gently. Isabella could only shake her head, the shame and fear a toxic cocktail in her throat. And then, just as she felt she was losing her grip, the door to her suite swung open. For a heart-stopping second, Relief flooded her. He was here. Alejandro stood in the doorway, his tailored suit slightly disheveled, his hair looking like he'd run his hands through it 100 times. But the relief curdled into ice-cold shock. He was not alone. Standing just behind him, her hand possessively resting on his arm, was Sophia Reyes. The actress was a vision of cruel perfection. She wore a figure-hugging crimson dress that seemed to mock the sterile white of the hospital. Her makeup was flawless, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in a perfect wave. She surveyed the room with an air of bored amusement. Her eyes, when they finally landed on Isabella in the bed, held a glint of undisguised triumph. It was the look of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. The beeping of the fetal heart monitor seemed to grow louder, a frantic, rhythmic testament to the chaos that had just stormed into the room. Isabella stared at Sophia's hand on her husband's arm, at the unapologetic way Alejandro stood there, bringing his mistress to the birth of his child. The pain of her contractions was nothing compared to the agony that ripped through her heart. The storm had not just arrived. It had made landfall directly in the center of her soul. The air in the birthing suite grew thick-heavy with unspoken betrayals and the sterile scent of antiseptic. For a long moment, the only sound was the frantic, steady beep of the monitor, tracking her baby's heartbeat, a stark counterpoint to Isabella's own, which felt as if it had shattered into a million silent pieces. Alejandro. Isabella's voice was a fragile thread of sound, barely audible over the hum of the machines. He finally moved, detaching himself from Sophia's grasp, as if suddenly remembering where he was. He took a hesitant step forward, his handsome face a mask of conflicting emotions, guilt, frustration, and a flicker of something she couldn't name. Isabella. I came as soon as I got your message. You brought her. Isabella's gaze flickered to Sophia, who was now examining her perfectly manicured nails with a deliberate, insulting nonchalance. Isabella, now is not the time Alejandro said, his voice low, urgent. He was trying to manage the situation, to control the narrative, just as he did in his boardrooms. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was the precipice of Isabella's world. Not the time. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat, raw and painful. You bring your mistress Sophia Reyes, the woman whose perfume clings to your clothes to the birth of our child, and you tell me it's not the time. Another contraction seized her, a vice of pure agony. She cried out, arching her back, the physical pain a welcome distraction from the emotional torment. A nurse rushed to her side, offering her a hand to squeeze. Isabella gripped it, her eyes never leaving Alejandro's. Sophia finally spoke, her voice as smooth and cold as polished marble. He was with me when you called, at a very important dinner. I simply insisted on coming along to offer my support. She smiled, a small, cruel curve of her lips. We wouldn't want you to be alone at a time like this. The audacity of it was breathtaking. My support. Isabella repeated, her voice shaking with rage. You have been trying to destroy my marriage for months. You are not welcome here. Get out. I'm afraid that's up to Alejandro, isn't it? Sophia's gaze shifted to him, a silent challenge. Tell her, darling. Alejandro looked trapped, a lion caught in a snare of his own making. Sophia, maybe you should wait outside, he said, his voice lacking any real conviction. No, Sophia said firmly, stepping forward. She was claiming her territory. I'm staying. Isabella needs to face reality. Our relationship isn't some sordid little affair. It's real, And frankly, after all the stress you've put him under with your condition, he needs me here." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Her condition, her pregnancy, the most sacred journey of her life reduced to an inconvenience, a burden. "How dare you?" she whispered, the words filled with a venom she didn't know she possessed. "This is my child. Our child." She looked pointedly at Alejandro, her eyes begging him to say something to defend her, to defend their family. "And we need to be sure of that, don't we?" Sophia added quietly, the words dropping into the tense silence like stones into a still pond. Isabella's head snapped towards her. "What did you just say?" Alejandro finally seemed to find his voice a harsh, defensive tone. "That's enough, Sophia." But the poison had been administered. The seed of doubt, expertly planted by a master manipulator, had found fertile ground in the fractured trust between husband and wife. Isabella stared at Alejandro, searching his face for denial, for outrage at Sophia's insinuation. Instead, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his dark, honey eyes. That flicker was the final fatal blow. He was actually considering it. He was doubting her fidelity. He was doubting their child. A wave of nausea and despair washed over her, so powerful it eclipsed the physical pain. This was a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. Her husband, the man she loved more than life itself, stood before her, with his mistress on the verge of questioning the legitimacy of the baby she was currently fighting to bring into the world. The white walls of the luxurious suite began to close in the beeping of the monitor, sounding like a death knell for the life she once knew. In that moment, Isabella understood that she was not just in labor with her child. She was in the process of giving birth to a new horrifying reality. The battle of childbirth was primal and all-consuming. In the hours that followed the confrontation, the world outside of Isabella's body ceased to exist. The sharp words, the betrayal, the chilling presence of Sophia Reyes. It all faded into a distant roar, subsumed by the singular monumental task of bringing her son into the world. Alejandro remained a silent, brooding figure in the corner of the room, while Sophia, to Isabella's fury, had been permitted to wait in the private lounge adjoining the suite. Her presence was a toxic energy that seeped under the door. At 3:17 in the morning, after a final heroic push that tore a scream from Isabella's raw throat, her son was born. He was perfect. A mess of dark hair, a tiny, scrunched-up face, and a cry that was startlingly robust. When the nurse laid him on her chest, warm and slick against her skin, a wave of love so fierce, so absolute, washed over Isabella, cleansing her of everything else. This tiny, helpless being was hers. He was the one pure, untainted thing in her shattered world. She looked at his face, tracing the delicate line of his brow, his miniature nose. She saw Alejandro in him. It was unmistakable in the curve of his lips and the shape of his eyes, which were still sealed shut against the harsh, new light of the world. Tears of exhaustion, relief, and a profound, aching love streamed down her face. She named him Mateo. The door opened, and Alejandro approached the bed, his earlier defensiveness replaced by a look of stunned awe. He stared at the small bundle in Isabella's arms, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, Isabella's heart dared to hope. Perhaps, seeing his son, his own flesh and blood, would shatter the spell Sophia had cast over him. He's beautiful, Isabella. Alejandro, whispered his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a hesitant hand, his fingers brushing against Matteo's soft cheek. But the moment was shattered almost as soon as it began. Sophia appeared in the doorway. Her arms crossed her expression, a careful blend of feigned warmth and clinical assessment. "Congratulations," she said, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness. "He is small." She walked closer, her gaze fixed on the baby. "It's remarkable, isn't it? How babies can look like anyone." She let the comment hang in the air before turning her perfectly painted smile on Alejandro. "Darling, now that the hard part is over, perhaps it's time to clear the air, for everyone's peace of mind." Alejandro flinched but didn't contradict her. The poison was still at work. Isabella clutched Matteo closer, a primal protective instinct flaring within her. "There is nothing to clear up," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Oh, I think there is," Sophia countered smoothly. "A man like Alejandro needs certainty. He's building an empire, a legacy. The question of succession of lineage. It's not a trivial matter. A simple test would resolve everything. It would be a gift, really, to all of us." Isabella looked at Alejandro, her eyes pleading with him. "Don't do this, Alejandro. Don't do this to us. To him." He wouldn't meet her gaze. He looked from Matteo's innocent face to Sophia's calculating one, his own a canvas of torment. The pressure from Sophia, coupled with his own wounded pride and the seeds of doubt she had so expertly sown, was too much. He was a man accustomed to data, to facts, to mitigating risk, and in his compromised state, that's what this had become, a risk to be managed. "It's just a formality, Isabella," he said, finally his voice devoid of emotion. "To silence any questions. We'll use the best lab. My office uses a place for corporate matters, high-level stuff. Gene Corp Diagnostics. They're discreet and foolproof." The name meant nothing to Isabella, but the words foolproof and formality felt like daggers. He had already made the decision. He had chosen doubt over faith, accusation over love. A nurse, looking deeply uncomfortable, entered with the necessary kit. A simple buccal swab from the inside of Matteo's cheek and one from Alejandro. The procedure was quick, sterile, and clinical. As the nurse gently swabbed her newborn son's mouth, Isabella felt a profound and bitter coldness seep into her bones. Her son's welcome into the world was not a celebration of love, but an evidence-gathering exercise. His very identity was being questioned before he had even been alive for an hour, all because his father had brought a viper into their lives. The results, Alejandro informed her, would be expedited. They would have the truth in 24 hours. For Isabella, it felt like a death sentence. The next 24 hours were the longest of Isabella's life. She refused to let Matteo leave her sight, holding him, feeding him, memorizing every detail of his perfect face, as if she were branding the image of him onto her soul. Alejandro had retreated, booking a separate room in the hospital at Sophia's insistence. He sent flowers, a massive, ostentatious bouquet of white lilies that filled the room with a funereal scent. Isabella had the nurses remove them immediately. She existed in a state of suspended animation, a bubble of maternal love, surrounded by a sea of dread. Every time the door opened, her heart leaped into her throat. Nurses came and went, checking on her, and the baby, their professional smiles doing little to soothe her frayed nerves. They all knew. The hospital staff whispered in the hallways. The story of the millionaire, his laboring wife, and the famous actress was the kind of drama that spread like wildfire. Isabella felt their pity, their judgment, and it was suffocating. Late the next afternoon, Alejandro appeared at her door. Alone this time. He looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. In his hand he held a sleek tablet. "The results are in," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. He didn't approach the bed, but stood near the door, as if creating a safe distance between them. Isabella's breath hitched. She tightened her hold on Mateo, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Alejandro, Gene Corp just sent the encrypted report to my secure server," he said, his fingers tapping on the screen. He brought up a document, a clinical-looking page filled with genetic markers and technical jargon, but at the bottom, highlighted in a stark red box, was the conclusion. He turned the tablet towards her. She didn't need to read the complex data. The 2 words at the bottom were all that mattered. Probability of paternity, 0%. The world tilted on its axis, the beeping of the monitors, the distant city sounds, her own breathing. It all faded into a deafening silence. 0%. The number was an absurdity, a statistical impossibility, a lie so profound it defied comprehension. "No," she whispered. It was the only word she could form. "No, that's not possible. It's a mistake." Alejandro let out a harsh, broken sound that was almost a laugh. "A mistake Isabella Gene Corp Diagnostics has a perfect record. They are the best in the world. The science doesn't lie." He looked at her then, and the conflict that had been warring in his eyes was gone. It had been replaced by a chilling certainty, a look of utter betrayal and revulsion. All this time, he said, his voice thick with a pain so deep it was terrifying. Our entire marriage. Was it all a lie? Who was he, Isabella? Who was the man you were sleeping with behind my back? There was no one, she cried, her voice cracking. Alejandro. You are his father. I have never been with anyone but you. Look at him. He looks just like you. I don't see it. He shot back his face, a cold, hard mask. I see a stranger. I see your betrayal. Suddenly the door swung open, and Sophia swept in, a dark angel arriving for the final act. She went straight to Alejandro's side, placing a comforting hand on his back. I'm so sorry, darling, she murmured, though her eyes when they met Isabella's were alight with malicious triumph. I knew something was wrong. I could feel your pain. She was the architect of this destruction, and now she was playing the part of the savior. There's been a mistake, Isabella, repeated her voice, rising with hysteria. The lab, someone made a mistake. Or you did this, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Sophia. This is your doing. Sophia feigned a wounded look. Isabella, I know you're emotional, but this paranoia is not helping. You've been caught in a lie, and you're lashing out. It's understandable. She turned to Alejandro. She's not well, my love. We need to get you away from this toxicity. Alejandro looked at Isabella, at the woman he had once loved, now hysterical in a hospital bed, clutching a child he believed wasn't his. And he made his choice. My lawyers will be in contact with you, he said, his voice as cold and final as a tombstone. They will arrange for a settlement on the condition that you sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear. You will not use my name. The child is not my responsibility. You are on your own. He turned and walked away. Sophia clinging to his arm, whispering soothingly to him. He didn't look back. The door clicked shut, plunging the room into a deafening silence. Isabella stared at the closed door, her mind struggling to process the cataclysmic event that had just occurred. She had lost everything: her husband, her home, her name, her future. They had taken it all. She looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. He was all she had left. A new feeling began to smolder beneath the shock and grief. It was a slow burning ember of rage. They had called her a Lyra. They had called her son a stranger. They had built a lie on top of a betrayal and used it to destroy her. "No," she whispered, not to the empty room, but to her son. "I will not disappear. I will fight. I will prove who you are, Matteo. I swear it." The first deception had been fired. The war had just begun. The eviction was swift and brutal. Less than 48 hours after giving birth, while she was still physically and emotionally shattered, a stern-faced man in a tailored suit, one of Alejandro's lawyers, arrived at the hospital. He presented her with a set of papers and a bank card. "Mr. Morales has made an initial deposit of 50,000 euros into this account." The lawyer stated, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "It is a gesture of goodwill. In exchange, you will vacate the premises of the Madrid estate by the end of the day. A car will be waiting to take you and the child wherever you wish to go within the city limits." He slid another document across the table. A non-disclosure agreement. "Sign this and a more substantial final settlement will be discussed. Refuse and the goodwill deposit is all you will ever receive." Isabella looked at the man at the cold legal document that sought to erase her from Alejandro's life to buy her silence and her son's illegitimacy. The ember of rage within her glowed brighter. She pushed the papers back across the table. "Tell Alejandro Morales I will not be silenced," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The lawyer simply raised an eyebrow, collected his papers and left. The message was clear. She had chosen the hard way. Thrown out of the hospital with a newborn and a small bag of borrowed baby supplies. The reality of her situation hit her with the force of a physical blow. The gilded cage had vanished, and she was in a free fall. She had no family in Madrid. Her parents lived in a small town in a different country, and had a fragile relationship with Alejandro at best. Her so-called friends were Alejandro's friends, society swans who would flock to power and money, and would undoubtedly believe the salacious narrative Sofia and Alejandro were already spinning. There was only one person she could turn to: Anna. Anna was her childhood friend, a fiery, no-nonsense journalist who had always viewed Isabella's millionaire lifestyle with a healthy dose of skepticism. She lived in a small, cluttered but cozy apartment in the vibrant Malasaña district, a world away from the sterile opulence Isabella had known. When Isabella called, her voice breaking, Anna didn't hesitate. "Give me the address. I'm coming to get you." Seeing Anna's familiar, warm face was the first moment Isabella felt she could truly breathe. Anna took one look at her pale, shell-shocked friend and the tiny infant in her arms, and her expression hardened with protective fury. "That son of a bitch," Anna muttered carefully, taking Matteo from Isabella's arms so she could get in the car. "I never trusted him. Too polished. Too perfect." Anna's apartment was a sanctuary. It smelled of coffee, old books, and life. While Isabella showered, Anna made a makeshift nursery in her spare room. She listened patiently as Isabella recounted the entire horrific ordeal, the months of suspicion, the confrontation in the hospital, Sofia's cruel words, and the devastating DNA test. 0%, Anna said, her journalist's mind immediately kicking into gear. That's not just a negative result, that's a statistical anomaly. It's almost more likely to get a false positive than a result that absolute. Unless it's true, Isabella whispered, the fear still a raw wound. No, Anna said firmly, her eyes blazing with conviction. Unless it was rigged. You said he used a place called Gene Corp Diagnostics. Isabella nodded. I've heard of them, Anna said, pulling out her laptop. They're top tier. They handle sensitive corporate espionage cases, high-stakes patent disputes. Their security is supposed to be legendary, which also means their reputation is everything. A proven mistake would ruin them. For days, Isabella focused solely on Matteo, finding a fragile peace in the simple, demanding rhythm of caring for a newborn. But Anna was a dog with a bone. She spent her nights digging, using her journalistic resources and back channels to probe into Gene Corp. It's a fortress, Anna reported back a week later, frustrated. Their digital security is airtight. No disgruntled employees speaking out, no whispers of malpractice. They're clean. Isabella's heart sank. So it's a dead end. Not necessarily, Anna said, her eyes gleaming. If you can't break down the front door, you look for a side window. You said Alejandro's lawyer mentioned they use Gene Corp for corporate matters, right? High-level stuff. Isabella nodded. So who in Alejandro's corporate world would have the motive and the means to orchestrate something this complex? This isn't just about a jealous mistress wanting to get rid of a wife. Tampering with a Gene Corp result would be incredibly risky and expensive. Sophia might have the motive, but does she have that kind of power? This feels bigger. This feels like a corporate hit aimed directly at Alejandro's heart. Anna's words hung in the air. The idea was terrifying, but it also made a twisted kind of sense. The attack felt too precise, too devastating to be merely a crime of passion. They had targeted his legacy, his heir. We need proof, Anna. Without it, it's just a crazy conspiracy theory from a bitter, discarded wife. Then we get proof, Anna declared, her jaw set. We can't challenge Gene Corp head-on. But we can investigate the chain of custody. The sample was taken at the hospital. It was picked up by a courier. It was delivered to the lab. Every step is a link in the chain, and every chain has a weak link. We just need to find it. It was a sliver of hope, but for Isabella, it was everything. She was no longer just a victim. She was a fighter. Cast out and left with nothing, she and Anna would start their own investigation, a quiet war waged from a small apartment in Malasaña against a powerful, unseen enemy. They were looking for the truth, one broken link at a time. The first few weeks of the investigation were a series of frustrating dead ends. Anna's official inquiries into the hospital's protocol were met with polite but firm stonewalling, citing patient confidentiality. Alejandro's confidentiality. They refused to release the name of the courier service or the specific technician who handled the samples. It was a wall of institutional silence designed to protect wealthy clients. They're circling the wagons, Anna said, pacing her small living room, a mess of papers spread across her coffee table. Alejandro's legal team has probably already been in contact, reminding them of the consequences of a privacy breach. Isabella, rocking a fussy Matteo, felt a familiar wave of despair. So we're stuck. No, Anna insisted, her eyes alight with a new idea. We're thinking like journalists trying to get people to talk. We need to think like a spy. The weak link isn't the official channels, it's the people. Anna's new strategy was to focus on the human element. She spent days camped out in the cafe across from the Clínica Universidad de Navarra, observing the flow of medical couriers. She cross-referenced the logos on their uniforms with local company databases. After 3 days of surveillance and 10 cups of coffee, she got a hit, a mid-level company called Biotrans Express. They weren't the biggest or most prestigious, but they handled overflow work for several major hospitals. The next step was to find the driver. Anna, using a plausible cover story about a lost but sentimentally valuable and non-biological package, managed to get a list of drivers who had been on duty the night Mateo was born. One name stood out: Javier. A part-time driver, a university student trying to make extra cash. He was the definition of a weak link. Finding Javier was easy enough. Getting him to talk was harder. Anna and Isabella, with Mateo sleeping in his carrier, cornered him one afternoon on his university campus. He was jumpy, defensive, and denied everything. I just deliver the packages, he insisted, refusing to make eye contact. I don't know what's in them. I pick up. I drop off. That's it. But Anna was relentless. We know there was a special pickup that night. A priority run from the Clínica to Gene Corp Diagnostics. A VIP client. A pickup that was logged under unusual circumstances. She was bluffing, but it was a calculated risk. Javier's composure cracked. He paled. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Isabella spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but heavy with the weight of her pain. She adjusted the carrier so Javier could see Mateo's sleeping face. That package contained the future of this little boy. It was a lie. And we think you know something about it. The sight of the baby, the raw emotion in Isabella's voice, seemed to break through Javier's fear. He glanced around nervously, then motioned for them to follow him to a more secluded bench. Look, I needed the money, he confessed, his voice dropping to a whisper. My tuition was due. I got a call that night, not from my dispatcher, but from a private number. It was a man. He told me to intercept the VIP pickup from the Clínica. He said the original sample was contaminated, and that he had the replacement sample. He told me to make sure the replacement was the one that got delivered to Gene Corp. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. A replacement sample. Did you see the man? Javier shook his head. No. He directed me to a side street near the hospital. The package was left for me in a lockbox. It looked official, same packaging, same seals. But the original sample, I was supposed to destroy it. He paid me 5,000 euros just to switch the packages and keep my mouth shut. It was the smoking gun, a confession, a clear act of sabotage. Did he give you a name? Anything? Anna pressed. No name, Javier said. But his voice, it was distinctive, low, gravelly, and he mentioned a name. He said, Rivas will be pleased the matter is handled. The name hung in the air. Rivas. It meant nothing to Isabella. But when she relayed the information to Anna later that night, Anna's eyes went wide. She turned to her laptop and began typing furiously. Ricardo Rivas. Anna breathed, pulling up a series of articles. He's Alejandro's biggest rival. They've been locked in a brutal corporate war for the last 2 years over a new cellular technology patent. Rivas has a reputation for playing dirty. Very dirty. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, forming a picture far more sinister than Isabella could have imagined. This wasn't just about Sophia Reyes. She was likely a pawn, a beautiful, willing distraction. The real mastermind was Ricardo Rivas. He hadn't just wanted to wound Alejandro in the boardroom. He had orchestrated a strike against him that was deeply, horrifically personal. He had aimed to invalidate Alejandro's legacy, to poison the root of his dynasty, by making him deny his own son. But what about Sophia? Isabella asked. She was there. She was the one who pushed for the test. And who do you think put the idea in her head? Ana countered. Rivas is smart. He wouldn't get his own hands dirty. He would find someone close to Alejandro, someone with their own motives, and use them. Sophia wanted you gone. Rivas wanted Alejandro broken. They had a common enemy. Suddenly, Ana stopped. She was staring at a photo from a society gala taken 6 months prior. In the background, almost lost in the crowd, stood Sophia Reyes. She was in an animated conversation with a silver-haired, imposing man. Ana zoomed in. The man was Ricardo Rivas. It was all the proof they needed to take the next step. They had the driver's confession. They had the motive. They had the connection between the conspirators. They now had the ammunition to go back to Alejandro, not as a spurned wife with a wild theory, but with cold, hard facts. They had a glimmer of hope, and it was blindingly bright. Armed with Javier's confession and the damning connection between Sophia and Ricardo Rivas, Isabella knew she couldn't just walk up to Alejandro. He was walled off, cocooned in his anger, and manipulated by the very people who had orchestrated his pain. She needed a battering ram, and that meant finding a lawyer who was fearless enough to take on a titan like Alejandro Morales. Ana, through her network, found the perfect person. A sharp, formidable attorney named Elena Vargas, a woman known for taking on impossible cases and winning. Elena listened to Isabella's story in her sleek, minimalist office, her expression unreadable. She examined Ana's research, Javier's secretly recorded confession, and the photograph of Sophia with Rivas. When Isabella was finished, Elena leaned back in her chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "This is beautiful," Elena said the words, sending a shiver down Isabella's spine. "It's a symphony of corporate espionage and personal betrayal. They didn't just break the law. They were arrogant about it." Elena's strategy was aggressive. She didn't file a quiet motion. She fired a cannonball. She filed an emergency petition with the family court alleging fraud, conspiracy, and emotional distress. Crucially, she demanded an immediate court-ordered and supervised second DNA test. She attached Javier's affidavit and the evidence linking Sophia to Rivas. She served the papers not just to Alejandro's legal team, but to Alejandro himself. The effect was explosive. Alejandro, who had been trying to bury his pain in work and the empty companionship of Sophia, was blindsided. His lawyers had assured him Isabella would fade away. Instead, she had returned with an army. His first reaction was rage. He called Elena roaring about defamation and harassment. "Mr. Morales." Elena's voice was like ice over the phone. "Your anger is noted. However, we have a sworn affidavit from the courier who switched the samples on the night your son was born. He did so on the instruction of a man who stated that Rivas will be pleased. We also have evidence placing your current companion, Miss Sophia Reyes, in private conversation with your chief business rival, Ricardo Rivas. If you wish to contest this in open court, and have this drama play out on the front page of every newspaper, be my guest. Or you can consent to a simple supervised blood test. The choice is yours. Faced with the undeniable evidence and the threat of a public spectacle that would destroy his company's reputation, Alejandro was cornered. He agreed to the test. The second test was a world away from the first. It took place in a neutral medical facility overseen by a court-appointed supervisor. Elena Vargas was there, a stoic guardian. Alejandro was there, his face pale and grim. Isabella was there, holding Mateo, her heart, a tangled mess of hope and fear. Sofia was notably absent, having been ordered by Alejandro's frantic lawyers to make herself scarce. The blood draw was quick. The wait for the results was agonizing. They all gathered 2 days later in Elena Vargas's conference room. The air was thick enough to cut with a knife. A court official arrived with a sealed envelope. He opened it and read the single-page report aloud. His voice was flat and official. Based on the analysis of the DNA samples provided, the alleged father, Alejandro Morales, is not excluded as the biological father of the child, Mateo Morales. The probability of paternity is 99.9999%. Silence. The words echoed in the sterile room. 99.9999%. Isabella let out a shuddering sob, burying her face in Mateo's soft blanket. Vindicated. Her son was vindicated. Alejandro stared at the report as if it were written in a foreign language. The color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, mottled gray. The entire foundation of his rage, his cruelty, his life for the past month had been a lie. A lie he had not only believed, but had championed. He looked at Isabella, truly looked at her for the first time since that horrific night in the hospital. He saw the profound pain in her eyes, the exhaustion, the resilience. And he saw the love she held for the son he had disowned. The weight of his actions crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his hand going to his chest as if he couldn't breathe. Isabella. He choked out his voice, a raw, broken thing. My God, what have I done? The unmasking was complete. But the truth was a double-edged sword. It had cleared Isabella's name, but it had also unleashed a new kind of chaos. The betrayal was not hers, but his, and the man who had been the architect of it all, Ricardo Rivas, was still out there, while the woman who had acted as his willing accomplice, Sofia Reyes, was about to face a reckoning of her own. Alejandro had his son back, but he had lost his wife, and the journey to even begin to atone for that was a mountain far higher than any he had ever climbed in the world of business. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Armed with the court-verified DNA results and Javier's testimony, Elena Vargas didn't just win. She went on the offensive. She strategically leaked key parts of the story to Ana, who crafted a stunning, explosive piece of investigative journalism that laid the entire conspiracy bare. The story of the corporate titan, the spurned wife, the scheming actress, and the rival who weaponized a baby's paternity became an international sensation. Ricardo Rivas's reputation was shattered. His company's stock plummeted as investors fled from the taint of his dishonorable tactics. He was engulfed in a firestorm of lawsuits and investigations. Sofia Reyes's career evaporated overnight. The endorsement deals vanished. The film roles were rescinded. Branded as a malicious homewrecker and a co-conspirator in a cruel plot against a mother and her newborn, she became a pariah. The public that had once adored her now reviled her. She disappeared from the limelight, her ambition turning to ash in her mouth. But for Isabella, the public victory was a hollow echo compared to the private war still raging in her heart. Alejandro was a man undone. The revelation had not just exposed his gullibility, it had forced him to look at a part of himself he never knew existed, a cruel, vengeful, and weak man, easily manipulated by pride and a beautiful face. He was consumed by a guilt so profound it was a physical illness. He fired his entire legal team. He came to Anna's apartment, not as a millionaire, but as a penitent. He stood at the door, drenched from the rain, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Isabella," he said, his voice raw. "There are no words to excuse what I did. I was a fool, a monster. I let them poison my mind against you, the purest thing in my life. I betrayed you. I betrayed our son." He had transferred the Madrid mansion into her name. He had set up a trust fund for Mateo so vast that it would ensure his future 100 times over. He offered to finance Anna's dream of starting her own independent news agency. He offered Isabella anything she wanted the world if she would just take it. But Isabella was no longer the woman who had lived in the gilded cage. The fire of the past month had burned away her naivete, reforging her into someone stronger, someone who understood that her worth was not tied to a man, a mansion, or a name. She let him see Mateo. She watched as he held his son for the first time with the full, undisputed knowledge that this was his flesh and blood. She saw the tears stream down his face, the profound, gut-wrenching regret in his eyes. A part of her, the part that still loved the man he once was, ached for him. But love was no longer enough. Trust once shattered so completely could not simply be glued back together. Weeks turned into months. Alejandro was relentless in his pursuit of redemption. He attended therapy. He made public apologies. He dedicated his time and resources to charities for single mothers. He sent her letters not of excuse, but of self-reflection, taking full accountability for his every failure. He didn't ask her to come back. He simply asked for the chance to prove he could be the father Mateo deserved, and perhaps one day, a man she could respect again. The story ends not with a kiss, but with a choice. We see Isabella months later, sitting in the sun-drenched garden of the Madrid mansion. Her mansion. She is radiant, confident, a queen on her own throne. Mateo is laughing in his playpen on the grass. Her phone buzzes. It's a message from Alejandro. He is in the city and would like to see Mateo. He makes no demands on her time, simply offering to be a father. Isabella looks at her son, at the beautiful life she has secured for them both. She has been vindicated. She has found her power. The story is no longer about his betrayal, but about her resilience. Whether she will ever let Alejandro back into her heart remains an unanswered question. But for the first time, the choice is entirely hers. She is not a victim of a millionaire's drama, but the architect of her own new life, built from the ashes stronger and more beautiful than before. The journey of Isabella is a testament to the incredible strength of a mother's love and the resilience of the human spirit. From the depths of unimaginable betrayal to the triumphant reclaiming of her truth, her story reminds us that even when our worlds are set on fire, we can rise from the ashes. But what do you think? Was Alejandro's remorse genuine? Can a trust so completely shattered ever be rebuilt? Or are some betrayals truly unforgivable? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of drama resilience and ultimate justice moved you. Please give this video a like and share it with others who love a story where the truth prevails. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next compelling narrative. Thank you for listening.